friends, Donald Trump has gone and put his foot in his mouth again. Frankly, it feels like there are some days that the only reason he opens his mouth is to change feet. The Trump administration was ordered by the Supreme Court to, quote, facilitate Abrego Garcia's return to the United States, but Donald Trump's DOJ lawyers have been reluctant to do that. They've been dragging their feet. They even violated a court order. That's not my take. I will read you what the judge said in that regard in a few minutes. But now, Donald Trump has gone and just cut the legs out from under his own DOJ attorneys in the Garcia case, saying, quote, if the Supreme Court said bring somebody back, I would do that. I respect the Supreme Court. And boy, did Abrego Garcia's lawyers jump on that statement by Donald Trump, and it has already made an appearance in a court pleading. So let's start with the new reporting, and then let's turn to some of the court filings and some of the court orders that have been coming fast and furious in this case, including during the weekend. But let's start with the new reporting from NPR. Headline, Maryland judge again asks government, Donald Trump's administration, to return man wrongly deported to El Salvador. A federal judge ordered the Trump administration on Friday to provide her with daily updates on its efforts to return a Maryland man who was wrongly deported to El Salvador back to the United States. The mood was tense in the courtroom as the judge, Paula Shinas, chastised Justice Department lawyers and expressed frustration with the government's efforts to comply. The hearing followed Thursday's Supreme Court ruling largely upholding Judge Shinas' order to bring Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia back to the U.S. Within hours of the High Court's decision, Judge Shinas issued a new order directing the federal government to take all available steps to facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia to the United States as soon as possible. And she ordered the Justice Department to provide an immediate update on his location and status and what steps the government has taken so far to bring him back and what additional steps Trump's administration, is considering. But friends, after the judge ordered the Trump administration, the DOJ lawyers, to provide that information about Garcia and the steps they are taking to secure his return, the DOJ lawyers blew right by that deadline and failed to comply, prompting this order from Judge Shinas. Order. For the reasons discussed during today's status conference, the court finds that the defendants, that is the Trump administration, have failed to comply with this court's order. The court had directed defendants to file a supplemental declaration from an individual with personal knowledge addressing the following. 1. The current physical location and custodial status of Abrego Garcia. 2. What steps, if any, defendants have taken to facilitate Abrego Garcia's immediate return to the United States. And 3. What additional steps defendants will take and when to facilitate his return. Defendants made no meaningful effort to comply. But rather than moving right to contempt, Judge Shinas decided she would again order the Department of Justice, the Trump administration, to answer those questions, file a declaration answering those questions. This is the judge giving them a little bit more rope. And in the meantime, Mr. Garcia's lawyers filed something today in court picking up on Donald Trump's statement. Plaintiff's motion for additional relief. Yesterday, President Trump confirmed that the United States has the power to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from prison and return him to the United States. Quote, if the Supreme Court said bring somebody back, I would do that. I respect the Supreme Court. Those are the words of Donald Trump. Of course, That is precisely what the Supreme Court did when it ruled that this court's injunction properly requires the government, the Trump administration, to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. But Garcia's lawyers didn't stop there. In accordance with the court's order authorizing plaintiffs, Garcia, to seek additional relief beyond what this court previously ordered, plaintiffs request that the court order 3 additional types of relief. First, order the government to take, by end of the day, Monday, April 14, the specific steps set forth below to comply with the injunction in this case. Second, order expedited discovery on the government's actions or failure to act to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return to the United States. Third, order the government to show cause by 10 a.m. Monday, April 14, as to why it should not be held in contempt due to its failure to comply with the court's prior orders, including any failure to comply with the court's order of April 11. And friends, here is, I hesitate to say, the most disturbing part, because this is all disturbing. Our government just disappearing people unconstitutionally, and once they ship them off to prisons in foreign lands, they try to tell the courts that, well, they can't possibly bring them back. After blowing through the court deadline set by Judge Shinis, demanding information about what steps they have taken and what steps they will take to promptly return Abrego Garcia to the United States after unconstitutionally deporting him, they filed a declaration. The Department of Justice belatedly filed a declaration. And wait until you hear what they said. Declaration of Michael Kozak. I am Senior Bureau Official in the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs, United States Department of State. And he goes on to lay out his credentials. I am aware that the instant lawsuit has been filed seeking the return of Garcia to the United States from El Salvador. I provide this declaration based on my personal knowledge, reasonable inquiry, and information obtained from other State Department employees. So as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, okay, finally, here it comes. We're going to learn about the steps the Department of Justice, the Trump administration, are taking for the safe and prompt return of somebody they unconstitutionally disappeared and put in prison in El Salvador. Here it comes, finally, the answers to the judge's questions to comply with the judge's order. It is my understanding, based on official reporting from our embassy in San Salvador, that Abrego Garcia is currently being held in the Terrorism Confinement Center in El Salvador. He is alive and secure in that facility. He is detained pursuant to the sovereign domestic authority of El Salvador. I thought there must be a page missing, because in this declaration that they finally filed, they again defied the court order, directing them to provide information about the steps they had taken, the steps they are taking, the steps they will take to comply with the Supreme Court order, the Supreme Court directive to facilitate Garcia's release and ultimately his return to the United States. So they are gleefully in contempt of court at this point. And I have to believe that Judge Shinis will be on fire when she sees that they have again defied her court order, even after Donald Trump, that, unitary executive, the all-powerful head of the executive branch, even he said, oh, yes, we can and will bring him back. Well, the Supreme Court said facilitate his return. Boy, when they are back in court, I believe on the 15th, that is the next live hearing that will be held in this case, I look forward to what the judge has to say about this declaration, and I suspect she will be setting a show cause hearing for them to show cause as to why they are not in repeated contempt of her court orders. That's what we should see happen in this case next. Because justice matters